evening and welcome to Gravitas, the show where we break down news for you, getting you perspectives from a panel of experts on the big news stories of the day. I'm Sana Khan. Tonight we talk about what seems to be a worrying situation emerging in the United States. President Trump is in the process of unveiling the dark vision of an America under siege by radical Islam, and that, according to a latest report published in the New York Times, which says that it's now radically reshaping the policies of the United States. Also on the show, by testing a missile that is capable of carrying 10 nuclear warheads, is China preparing for a military showdown with the United States. Almost simultaneously, Kyodo News of Japan reported that China's top 5 enemies include, surprisingly, North Korea, which was always thought a China ally, and India. Should these countries on China's list be worried? But first, the current security scenario in Afghanistan. According to a US watchdog agency report, the government has less than 60% of the country under its control. US security forces have continued with their steady withdrawal. It's a challenge for Ashraf Ghani. The US military estimates that the Afghan government controls only 57% of the country. The report by the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction is a quarterly report for the US Congress. It confirms the widespread perception that the Afghan military and police are fighting the Taliban with their backs to the wall. They've taken heavy casualties and withdrawn from many areas. Let's take a look at a map now where government control looks impressive, spreading over many parts of the country from southwest to central and even the northwest. But in the provinces of Helmand and Uruzgan, the Taliban controls a majority of the districts today. 2.5 million Afghans live under Taliban control, and in a third of the country, more than 9 million people live in areas where the Taliban is fiercely attacking government positions. Nearly 7,000 Afghan army and police personnel have been killed last year in battles against the Taliban. For more on this, let me go across to Mr. Sudhir Ranjan Sen. He's the deputy editor with Huffington Post, joining me. Thank you so much, Mr. Sen, for speaking to us. Now, this particular report that we are highlighting shows a very bleak assessment as far as the security situation in Afghanistan is concerned. How worrying is this perhaps for Ashraf Ghani?
Well, it is very, very worrying for the Afghan government at the present moment in Kabul, and not only for the Afghan government. It is also very, very worrying for India because, mind you, if Afghanistan goes into a turmoil once again and it gets into the hands of Taliban, the spillover effect, as we have seen in the past, there is a blowback into India. There will be a blowback into Kashmir, and that is the reason why we see that the government or New Delhi being quite worried. There have been very many interactions between New Delhi and Kabul, where we have persistently heard Kabul asking for military aid. This government, mind you, has broken from the past and has started giving lethal weapons platforms to Kabul, which was not there in the UPA government. But this government has ventured out. We've given them helicopters, Russian-made helicopters to be used for counter-terrorist operations. There is a long list of weapons and weapon systems and platforms that Afghanistan has asked for India. So that is one part of it. The fact that it is slipping out of the Kabul, the control of Kabul, is known to New Delhi, and it is a huge, huge concern both for New Delhi and for this entire region.
Also, Mr. Sen, what does really Afghanistan, what must it be looking at in terms of the new, from the Trump administration now? Will they be willing to welcome the U.S. troops once again?
Well, I mean, it is not welcoming the U.S. troops, so to say. I mean, if the situation goes out of control, it depends how much the global, the question before the global community will be that can you allow Afghanistan to slip out of control into chaos, whereby we see another, in some more time, another repeat of a 9/11, or the entire region being, going into instability. And mind you, Afghanistan going into the hands of, or slipping out of control, or larger areas slipping out of control of Kabul, would mean there would be disturbances in Pakistan, there would be disturbances in India, and the spillover effect is also going to be there in China. And China is very, very worried about it. They are very worried about, the spillover effect in Xinjiang, where there is a large Muslim population. Plus, Russia is also very, very worried about what is happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is why we see them, getting closer to Pakistan.
All right, Mr. Sudhir Ranjan Sen, thanks so much for joining us there with a perspective. Let me quickly get in our Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui as well. Taha, what's the view in Pakistan over there? Does Pakistan think that Afghanistan has, some bit of control? Still talking about this report, particularly after it's come out.
Well, in fact, if you look at what Pakistani government here has to say, and especially the experts here, who are usually linked with the security establishment and the military, they all have this sort of narrative that right now in Afghanistan, the government is not in control. It's actually the Afghan Taliban which have more control in the area, and because of which there have been a lot of misunderstandings between the Afghan government and the Pakistani government, also because of this attitude that Pakistan has, where they try to sort of oversell the legitimacy of Afghan Taliban in Afghanistan. And despite the fact that we saw Ashraf Ghani, when he came into power, he tried to sort of reach out to Pakistan and said that we want to reset the relationship. And despite all of that, now we've seen that Ashraf Ghani once again has said that Pakistan is going behind their back and helping the Afghan Taliban, and we do know that the Afghan Taliban leadership is mostly based in Pakistan. So definitely in Pakistan, the view is that the Afghan Taliban are sort of in control, but that's more of the fact that they want to push that narrative also.
All right, Taha, thanks so much there for joining us for more inputs as far as the view from Pakistan is concerned. Now let's turn our attention to news coming in from Paris. At least one policeman was injured in what the government has described as a terror attack near the famed Louvre Museum. French authorities have opened a terror investigation now into the incident. The man who was wielding a machete near the museum was shot by a soldier, according to Paris police chief. The man had rushed towards a group of soldiers and guards. 5 shots were fired in response. The attacker was wearing 2 backpacks and may have had a second weapon as well. No explosives were found on him, though. This, according to the French Interior Ministry. Another person was also arrested. The French Prime Minister describing this attack as terrorist in nature. About 250 visitors were inside the Louvre Museum at the time of the attack. US President Donald Trump, in fact, tweeted after the incident. He said, and I quote, "A new radical Islamist terrorist has just attacked in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Tourists were locked down. France on edge again. Get smart, US." He ended by saying that in his tweet.
Un attaquant qui était armé d'une machette au moins, peut-être d'une deuxième arme, qui avait des sacs à dos, s'est précipité, s'est engagé auprès des policiers et des militaires qui étaient en sécurisation en proférant des menaces, notamment à l'Akbar.
All right, for more on this story, let me go across live to Mandy Clock. She joins me from London. Thanks, Mandy, so much for joining us. Now, first of all, let's start by getting the latest. Have any other reports emerged after we last spoke?
Not a lot more is coming to light. We don't know the identity or the nationality of the attacker. He had no ID on him. He is described as in a serious state, and they have not been able to revive him. The person who was arrested, it's unclear if he was in fact linked to the attack. He was acting strangely and he was nearby. He's being questioned, but it's unclear any more details on who they are or the motivation.
Also, Mandy, it's crucial to look at this incident specifically, in the light that it broke just hours before the bid officials hosted a ceremony there near the Eiffel Tower to coincide with the final submission of their dossier to host the Olympics in the years to come. So in that sense, it's going to be a big challenge again for Paris, fighting terror and to show the Olympic Committee that that Paris is secure.
Yeah, absolutely. Paris has been, in fact, and all of France has been in a state of emergency since November 2015. That's over a year. Of course, that's when the big Paris attacks happened. Then there's the Nice attacks, and that was where over 80 people were killed. That continued the state of emergency. So that's why there was already a lot of police presence. You know, when a country remains in a state of emergency for so long because of that high level of threat of terror, of course that's going to damage its international reputation. Although the Louvre is an icon, it's one of the most famous museums in the world, foreign travelers have been shunning France because of this perceived and very real threat of terrorism. So it does affect France. And it's very hard for them. They find the challenge of fighting terrorism very, very difficult. It's unclear who the attackers were, but the French Prime Minister has said it was a terrorist attack in nature. That's what we do now. Right,
Mandy. We'll be, of course, waiting for the latest information of the identity of the attacker. But for now, thanks so much for joining us with the latest. Well, now moving on, Islam is coming to the center of U.S. foreign policy. This warning comes from a New York Times report. It also says several key officials in the Trump administration are driving a dark and very serious and suspicious view of Islam. The recent ban on people from 7 Muslim countries is a case in point. Take a look.
America is under siege from radical Islam. Muslim immigrants in the West are killing innocents. These form part of a recent report by the New York Times headlined, "Trump pushes dark view of Islam to center of US policy making." The report says President Trump has embraced a deeply suspicious view of Islam. It draws from the clash of civilizations thesis of political scientist Samuel Huntington. It equates Islamic State and Al-Qaeda to peaceful movements like the Muslim Brotherhood. The recent ban on people from 7 Muslim countries draws from this dark view. Key people in his administration, the New York Times report said, are behind this. They include National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, Trump's top strategist Stephen Bannon, Deputy National Security Advisor Sebastian Gorka, the National Security Council's Tara Dahl. The report says that these key officials and others form what is described as an Islamophobia industry, a network of researchers who have warned of the dangers of Islam and were thrilled by Trump's election. They say Islamic law or Sharia is a danger to American freedoms and have persuaded several state governments to ban Sharia. Bureau Report, WION.
Now, Donald Trump, the U.S. president, has beat the anti-Islam drum through his election campaign after imposing the ban on people from 7 Muslim countries. Let's listen into what he said before.
I'm establishing new vetting measures to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States of America. We don't want them here. We want to ensure that we are not admitting into our country the very threats our soldiers are fighting overseas. We only want to admit those into our country who will support our country and love deeply our people.
We're going to be talking more about Trump's dark view on Islam and what really is he planning in the days to come with the immigration ban already in place. There are many other moves, in fact, according to this New York Times report, which are in the offing. There was this executive order on immigration, then the probability it suggests of a Muslim Brotherhood, a group in West Asia being designated as a terrorist organization. We're going to be talking about what the Trump administration's policy is headed towards. If the New York Times report is to be believed, Donald Trump's administration is looking at a very dark and very suspicious view on Islam, and a crackdown indeed has begun. In fact, let me go across live to Mr. Tahir Abbas. He is a senior research fellow from RUSI. He is joining us live from London. Thank you so much, Mr. Abbas, for joining us. Like we were telling our viewers, first came the executive order on immigration, then the probability, some are suggesting, of Muslim Brotherhood being designated as a terrorist organization. Are these steps indicative of US's policy in the weeks, months, or perhaps years ahead?
Well, it's certainly a very difficult situation. the announcements made by the Trump administration have definitely underscored a notion that they regard Islamic extremism as a general and worldwide threat, for which they will have policies introduced, such as the so-called Muslim ban, and obviously are taking a very hard line on all forms of Islamist extremism.
Also, Mr. Abbas, what do you think of this approach on the whole? If you look at the big picture, do you think the Trump administration is tapping into the fear, the sentiment of fear that came about post 9/11?
Well, this is a very good point, because a lot of people are talking about populism and the movement towards right-wing extremist politics in the mainstream, as it were. But this has been in the making for at least 2 decades. I think ever since the internet age, the idea of white nationalist, white supremacist, neo-Nazi thinking has been able to flourish with the minimal detection, and I think this is what we're seeing, an evolution. And right now it's a tipping point where, certainly in the case of the Trump administration, people with very dubious views about minorities and people who are not Christian even are in very powerful positions right now.
And, will branding the problem as radical Islam really the answer? Because will it not alienate millions, at least 3 or more than 3 million people who do live in America and who do practice Islam peacefully?
Absolutely. I mean, as we know, the vast majority of Muslims in the world have nothing to do with extremism and terrorism, and the world's Muslim populations are the ones who suffer most as a result of extremist and terrorist behavior. This is absolutely right, and the kind of narrative that has been used here and the way it has been communicated is absolutely what Islamic State and similar organizations use in their own recruitment processes, and this is these kind of lines taken by the administration in America at the moment feed into the narratives that ISIS wish to create and exploit.
What, according to you, my last question, will be, the result in the days or weeks to come of such a policy?
It's going to be very negative, but there's no immediate gain from it. There isn't a rational justification for a lot of the movements here. And we've already seen the negative repercussions in the form of the terrorist incident in Quebec over the last few days. And
right.
Again, we have a young individual, what they call a lone actor, involved in some kind of incident in France today, which again suggests that there are implications to consider.
That's right. In fact, Donald Trump there has tweeted as well, asking US to be alert at this point in time. On that note, thanks so much, Mr. Tahir Abbas, for joining us here and sharing your thoughts on this important story that we're tracking. Now, moving on, China has always been evasive about its nuclear might, unlike other countries of the world. However, a latest report now suggests that the country might just be looking to build its nuclear arsenal. Here's a report.
While several countries are coming to terms with US President Trump's latest executive orders, China seems to be preparing itself for a different battle. A report claims that the country last month tested the Dongfeng 5C missile, which can carry up to 10 nuclear warheads. The report of the missile test comes a month after the state-owned Chinese newspaper ran an editorial urging the government to boost its nuclear arsenal. The editorial said, and I quote, "Before Trump took power, his team showed a tough stance towards China, and in turn, Beijing will ready itself for pressures imposed by the new US government." The timing of the test suggests that China is preparing for a showdown with the United States. But, according to the report, testing a nuclear missile in China requires permission from the highest level, and it takes a year for the armed forces to get the approval. With uncertainty over China's nuclear arsenal and the country's no first use policy, this latest launch might be a sign that China is flexing its nuclear muscle in preparation for attacks from the many enemies it has acquired, both in the region and the rest of the world. Snigdh Pontial for WION.
In fact, to talk more about this, let me get in Mr. Rahul Bedi. He's a South Asia Bureau Chief with the Jane's Defense Weekly. Thanks so much, Mr. Bedi, for joining us here on Gravitas. Now, what do you make of China's latest missile test? This is a powerful long-range missile that we're talking about, which has the capability of carrying at least 10 nuclear warheads.
Sorry, are you asking me?
Yes, Mr. Bedi.
Yes, this is, as you said in your introduction, it's not something that's a reaction to Mr. Trump's becoming the president, because it takes a long time for the technological aspects of the missile system to kick in. But it is a dangerous development because the Chinese are known to have about 250 odd nuclear missiles, but with the multiple warheads that this missile is believed to have, which is around 10, that gives them that much force multiplication as far as their striking power is concerned. And with the range of this missile between 12 and 15,000 kilometers, it makes it a very dangerous weapon system.
Also, Mr. Bedi, talking about the new administration in the United States taking over, and of course, this is, years of time that we're talking about testing a missile. But do you see China adjusting its nuclear policy with the coming in of the Trump administration?
Most definitely, because I think the indications are that Mr. Trump has indicated, in fact, more than indicated, he's said that he's going to take up the issue of the South China Sea. He's going to take up the issue of Taiwan. He's also broken with tradition over several decades and called up the president of Taiwan recently. So all these are indications and are sort of red rags to the Chinese. And I think they are going to be fairly flexible and nimble and adjust their military and strategic policies likewise.
Also, Mr. Bedi, there are a lot of talk in the media about a possible war, perhaps, between the US and China. But I want your reaction on these two developments that have taken place recently, apart from this missile test. The second one is Chinese military official. He says that war with the US is becoming a practical reality. Also, Donald Trump has appointed a man who advocated war with China to the Principals Committee of the National Security Council. What do you make of these developments?
Well, I think these are very loose statements, and I think we should not, in the media, we should not get very excited about this kind of talk, because these are trial balloons that are floated by the Chinese. These are trial balloons that are floated by the American establishment. And let's not forget that these are sort of media reports. And even though some Chinese officials have been quoted, I would be a little wary of taking them very seriously, because war is a very serious business, and especially between two nuclear weapon states. I mean, we're talking about the possibility of wiping out, a third of humanity. So let's be a little sensible and a little circumspect when we do that.
All right. Mr. Bedi, also Kyodo News Agency of China, it's listed top 5 threats for China. And in it, among the other countries that figure apart from the US and Japan, there's also North Korea, which traditionally has been China's ally, and also New Delhi. What do you have to say on the threats, or what at least China perceives to be the 5 top threats for it?
Well, I'm very surprised that India figures in this list, because India and Japan have become close strategic allies in the last 5 or 6 years. They exercise regularly, their navies exercise regularly along with the United States. And they are, in a sense, forming a sort of a quadrilateral along with the US and possibly Australia, India and Japan, which is seen loosely as an anti-China grouping. So I'm very surprised that Kyodo News Agency has listed India as a threat to the Japanese. North Korea, yes. China, yes. But India seems a little surprising and a little out of context.
All right, Mr. Rahul Bedi, appreciate you taking our time and sharing your thoughts with us on this story where China really has, again, tested a missile which is capable of carrying at least 10 warheads and a range of 14,000 kilometers as well. We will be keeping an eye on those developments, but moving on, Member of Parliament in the Rajya Sabha in New Delhi, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, he's introduced a private member's bill to declare Pakistan a terror state. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, in fact, said that until and unless India takes the first step, India cannot expect other countries to do the same.
I submitted a resolution declaring Pakistan a terror state, and I also moved a private member's bill, which is the bill that has come up today for discussion and consideration, to call out states like Pakistan that continue to associate, promote, patronize and sponsor terrorism against our nation.
In fact, earlier we spoke to Mr. Chandrasekhar. Let's listen into what he said over the telephone.
18 September 2016, after the Uri attack, I had publicly stated that I was determined to do my best to declare Pakistan a sponsor of terrorism, because it occurred to me that we were becoming increasingly mute spectators to this continuous trend of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. And on 18th November, I managed to introduce this bill into Parliament, and today the bill came up for consideration in passing, and the debate has started. So the objective is not necessarily to pass this bill as is, but it is to start a debate within Parliament and to have Parliament for the first time do something or say something about Pakistan, because the last time that Parliament said anything about Pakistan was in 1994 when it passed a resolution. So I think it is, many lives have been lost since then. Many terror attacks have happened since 1994. And it is, in a sense, the duty of Parliament to do what the people of India, to a man and a woman, want, which is to do its best to expose Pakistan and to hold Pakistan to account. I think, most people in this country, most sensible people, most good-thinking people understand, and to a man and a woman, want Pakistan to be held to account for its many, many years of sponsoring of terrorism. There is no two doubts in the minds of the normal Indian citizens. Yes, there is politics, as there is with any issue that today, there will be some politics about it, but I believe to a large measure, most MPs want to do what is right and what is consistent with what people want, which is to start new discussion on Pakistan and to do more about Pakistan than just wring our hands and go to the nearest Western country and request them to declare Pakistan a terrorist state. It's just common sense that the rest of the world, if you want the rest of the world to condemn Pakistan, we have to take the first step. We have to out Pakistan. We have to hold Pakistan to account first before the rest of the world joins us.
All right, the MP there in the Rajya Sabha saying that India should perhaps take the first step and then the world can follow, and a discussion is needed to this effect to declare Pakistan a terrorist state. Let's get a perspective from our Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui, who now joins me. Taha, is this perhaps being reported in the Pakistani media? What are the experts over there saying about the move that's being initiated in India? The MP there making a statement in the parliament asking for a bill to declare Pakistan a terrorist state.
Well, we do know that Pakistan has been sort of being labeled as such by India for a long time now. And there have been statements from different policymakers in India stating the same then. But then again, every time that we've seen that in Pakistan right now, for example, this particular statement, there has not been much response here. There's been complete silence and not many have been discussing this. But at the same time, every time we do talk to Foreign Office and talk to them about the fact that, how relations with India, which have been quite tensed, that we saw last year were quite tense, and whether or not there is any improvement, chance of any improvement in that. And usually we get to hear about the fact that the talks between the two countries are based in Kashmir, and that's the Pakistani sort of narrative. On the other side, India keeps saying the very fact that the talks will be based on terrorism. But I mean, in the last 2 weeks, we've seen this development with regards to Pakistan taking some action, whether it's cosmetic right now, for example, according to some people, but still the fact that they have put the Mumbai attack suspect Hafiz Saeed under arrest. So that does reflect that Pakistan also understands these labels that it gets, and Pakistan is worried about its image internationally and is trying to do something to change that image. Whether or not it's doing something on the grounds, that's yet to be seen.
All right, Taha, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for the moment for joining us on that story. We're taking a very short break here on Gravitas. We'll be back with lots more news. Stay with us.